the bonding of persons in a circle of love. We thank you for such a blessing, for friends who love us, who share our sorrows, who laugh with us in celebration, who bear our pain, who need us as we need them, who weep as we weep, who hold us when words fail, and who give us the freedom to be ourselves. Bless our friends with health, wholeness, life, and love. St. Francis, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Have a seat. I want to welcome St. Francis students, faculty, staff, special guests, and everyone joining us live online. Our guest speaker today is the founder of Homeboy Industries, the largest gang intervention, rehabilitation, and reentry program in the world. In the face of law enforcement tactics and criminal justice policies of suppression and mass incarceration as a means to end gang violence, he and parish and community members adopted what was a radical approach at the time: treat gang members as human beings. In 1988, started what would eventually become Homeboy Industries, which employs and trains former gang members in a range of social enterprises, as well as provides critical services to thousands of men and women who walk through its doors every year seeking a better life. An esteemed author, revered scholar, and straight G, with us today is Father Greg Boyle, and with him, accompanying him, are two trainees, Raquan and Jose. Help me welcome them, gentlemen. Good morning, guys. Good luck. Good morning, guys. Good luck. Who's first?
Good morning, everyone. My name's Raquan. All right, let me start this off real fast. Where all my cool kids at? Raise your hand. All right. All right. Where all my gifted and talented smart kids at? Raise your hand. All right. What about my shy kids who don't really talk much? Raise your hand. All right. Let me tell you something. I was like all of you, you know? I was cool, but at the same time I was smart, but at the same time I was shy. And a lot of you can relate to me on this. I had a lot of pain, hurt, abandonment, depression, anxiety as a kid, you know, because, you know, my childhood wasn't perfect. You know, I was born in New Jersey. A few years later, I moved to South Carolina with my mom, you know. She left, started life, and lived with me and away from my father, you know. And I dealt with that loneliness in a strange way because I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why my dad couldn't be with me, you know. I didn't understand, you know, why couldn't he be there to show me, you know, like just spend time, show me how to be a man, you know, as I grew up. And my mom was always busy working 2 jobs to take care of me, so I didn't really have much time to spend with her either. A lot of times I you know, had my family members watch after me, you know, until I got a little bit older to watch after myself. And so I went through that depressive stage where I felt lonely, where I felt like no one was there, no one really cared, and also like I had a lot of things going on at home. Like I lived with one of my uncles, and you know, he was like a little bully. He was 3 years older than me, but he bullied me, you know, like we would fight, you know. And, you know, a lot of those things like really affected me. And, you know, I would still go to school, I would still get good grades, but, you know, I had all these things in my head that no one really knew because I didn't really share it. You know, but I would act out in school and get in trouble because of the pain that I felt inside from my father not being around, or because my uncle treated me like a certain way. And, you know, the fact that I couldn't really spend much time with my mom. Like, I wanted to do sports in school. I wanted to play football, soccer, you know, whatever, but I couldn't because my mom didn't have the time to take me, you know. So I started hanging out with my uncles. My uncles were gang members, you know. I started spending time with them, and I looked up to them as a father figure in my life because I didn't know at the time what a man was, you know. I didn't know what it takes to be a man. But when I seen them, like, they were tough to me in my eyes, you know. A lot of people were cool with them. A lot of people respected them. Like, it seemed to me that at the time they had their stuff together, and so I kind of followed along with them, and I was like, okay, this is what it is to be a man. You know, this is what it is to be tough or cool or whatever. And it was kind of like nonsense, but at the time I didn't see that because I was so caught up in my hurt that I gave up on myself. I gave up on my dream because I felt like, oh, you know, I can't play sports, so I'll never be in the NFL. You know, I can't, you know, I gave up. I used to want to be a doctor as a kid, like in elementary school. I'm going to be a doctor. I gave up on that. You know, I felt like I didn't have any support. Like no one was there to push me to do what I wanted to do in life. So I went down that dark road and I decided to join a gang. You know, I joined the gang and I reflected my hurt on other people. And I was surrounded by people who were hurt like me. So I felt accepted and loved. You know, I always search for that acceptance and love and like family, like where I'm going to be there for you, you're going to be there for me when I need to talk to someone, like we right there. But it was a false sense of love, you know. And you know, I went through a lot of messed up things in my life, like that I didn't really have to go through. A lot of traumatic experiences that I've seen, you know, and it carried on through the years, and it took many years to realize what was really going on. Honestly, just in the past few years, I realized what was going on in my life and why I was the way I was, you know. It took me years to forgive my father for not coming around because, you know, like I talked to him on the phone a few times. I seen him, I knew who he was, but he would not spend time with me. Like one thing that I remember from my childhood that stuck with me was one day we were at Walmart and there was a go-kart and I'm like, I want this go-kart. He's like, you want it now? I'll get it for you. I'm like, how are we gonna take it back to the house? He's like, don't worry about that. Me, I was a smart kid, so I'm like, you know what? I'll wait till like we can find a way to get it. And so that time never came, and I think that was the last time I seen him for many years. And you know, I held on to that. Like we all tend to hold on to pain in our lives, you know, and like I'm no different than you guys just because of where I was from, what I've done. Like I'm no different. Like I can relate to all of you in a way. Like I had dreams, you know, I still have dreams. You know, I was smart, I was cool. It's just the things that I've been through in my life, I made a different choice. And it wasn't the right choice, but at the time I didn't understand it. But I'm hoping like all of you guys could understand, you know, and follow your dreams regardless of what you may go through, what you may feel inside, what hurt and pain. And just know like we're all different, but we can all relate to each other in some type of way. Like, you know, we all have our own things we go through, regardless of what lifestyle you live, regardless of where you come from. You know, like we can all relate to each other. We can all love each other and accept each other. It's just certain things separates us from each other that shouldn't. You know, like stereotypes or whatever it is, you know. But in reality, we're all the same. You know, we just have different talents and gifts. But I'm here like I got asked to come here by Father G, you know. He's a great man. And I met him barely recently when I got out. I was incarcerated twice in my life, in 2016 and then again in 2017. You know, I never thought I would ever be incarcerated in my life. I never seen that for me. I always thought I was too smart to get locked up, you know. I'm like, even though I was in a gang and I did a lot of stupid things, like I was like, oh, I'm so smart for that. You know, only dumb people get locked up. Only dumb people go to jail, but that's not true. You know, if you're doing bad, it's bound to happen. So I went through this journey while I was incarcerated my last time. You know, I was facing some time. And I did some soul searching. You know, I looked within myself and I was wondering, you know, why am I the way I am? And I kept getting signs from different people before at that time I was incarcerated, like, you need to change your life. Like, even certain people, like homies who were gang members, tell me, God's calling you, you know, stop what you're doing. And I would ignore it. I didn't understand it. I couldn't figure out what it was that he wanted from someone like me. But you see, God loves everyone, and that's one thing we have to remember. He doesn't judge us. You know, he forgives us all. You know, if you read the Bible, you can see the different people that he called to do work for him, you know. Some of those people did a lot of bad things before, You know, some of those people even persecuted, you know, the people that God loved. But God called them and changed them for the better. And that's what he did with me. You know, he called me and he changed me. He touched my heart. He showed me, like, I still love you. I'm still here for you. You know, I still support you. There's still hope. Don't give up. You know, no matter what we go through, no matter what we do, we're going to make mistakes, but we're going to learn, you know. The only thing about is when you make a mistake, try to move forward and not keep making the same mistake over and over again and causing yourself to self-destruct. So while I was incarcerated, I experienced that, like, different people, like, God would talk to me through people, like, he does that. He talks to you through different people and he communicates with you. And so he told me, you know, like, one day I went to church and there's this little Asian guy in there, and he was like, he looked at me in my eyes. He's like, God was calling you, but you didn't listen. You kept running from him. That's why he put you here. And he also told me, like, you have something you need to do. You know, like, you're going to be like me. And then he also said, the things that I'm saying are not coming from me, but God is speaking through me. And that hit me because how would he know that God was calling me? How would he know that when I was out there, people would tell me, God's calling you, you need to stop what you're doing? How would he know that? I barely met this guy the first day. So that's when I knew who God was and what he wants. And so I was in there facing my time, and I went to trial and I won, and I was released. Now, once I was released, I'm like, wow, okay, you know, you really do have a purpose for me. You really, it was really what I needed to go through, you know, in order to be able to change. Because those gang members that I thought were my family, thought were my homies, I thought I could trust, that I was willing to die for because I was so hopeless, those were the people who turned on me, you know? So I had a second chance. And now it's like I got out and I was doing good. I'm like, you know what am I going to do in my life now? I need to get a job. So I'm chilling, and I'm going to Walmart, applying, you know, different places. I'm like, man, I need to get a job. Like, I need to get some money so I could take care of myself, you know, because I don't have family out here. So it's like, one day, like, I was talking to one of my friends, you know, my boys, and he was like, hey, I'm going to go get my tattoo removed at Homeboy Industries. I'm like, that's where I can get a job. Like, I always used to hear about Homeboy Industries, but I was so broken and so shameful to even walk in those doors. But anyways, long story short, I went there and I waited in the lobby, you know, for a bit, and I was about to walk out. Like, something told me to stay, and that's when I met this man right here, you know. And like, it's crazy because the day I met him, he showed me so much love and acceptance, and I never felt that before in my life, like from a complete stranger, you know. And that's when I knew I was in the right place. That's where I knew, like, I was somewhere that was genuine, where I will feel accepted regardless of where I came from and what I've done, and that I actually have another chance to prove myself to this world. And, you know, I started working with him, and, like, ever since I've been there, like, Homeboy Industries is like a place for people like me, people like all of us who've been broken and come from a hurt past, where we could actually follow our dreams. You could be whoever you want to be at Homeboy Industries. It's home. It's like, it's indescribable. You will really have to go for the experience to understand what I'm talking about, you know? And, you know, I just want to give thanks to Pops, you know, for giving me the opportunity, because I never got an opportunity like this in my life to follow my dreams and feel hopeful, you know, in my future. But I just want to thank you guys for having me and hearing, you know, a little bit of what I had to share. You know, I got a little bit nervous, but I just want you to know, like everything's going to be all right. You just keep your faith, you know, and, like, don't ever give up. No matter what you're going through, you'll make it through if you just keep your faith. Thank you.
Morning. My name is Jose Echeverria. I'm 37 years old. I was born and raised in East LA. And for me, growing up was a little bit difficult because I grew up with a lot of violence in my house. As a young kid, all I would see and remember was my dad being an alcoholic and beating up on my mom whenever he got the opportunity to. So I kind of grew up with that mentality that it was okay to be a violent person. After a while, though, I have a twin brother. After a while, me and my brother decided that, like, enough was enough. We were going to try to put a stop to my dad beating up on my mom because it was an everyday routine. I think we were about 10 years old. When my dad walked into the house one day, and of course, he was drunk, and the first thing he did is try to go for my mom, and me and my brother tried to stop him. And it didn't work out. Like, we ended up getting the worst of it and got thrown out of the house. Ever since then, ever since that time, it became a little different for us because we no longer, like, we were living in fear of being there. And we used to run away from home just so we could have some kind of, like, safe haven or something between me and my brother. Well, that safe haven became the streets for us. That's how I got introduced to the lifestyle. I joined the gang when I was 10 years old along with my brother. And ever since then, after that, it was full force on the streets. Nothing that I'm very proud of. As a matter of fact, I don't think any kid should ever have to go through the things that we went through. I got arrested when I was 12 years old the first time, and it didn't stop. It was a continuous thing. I grew up in juvenile halls, grew up in institutions, and for a long time, I held resentments. I resented my mom and my dad for putting us through the things that we went through. I thought it was okay to be a violent person. I used to transform my pain into violence. I didn't know any better. I thought it was okay to be a gang member. I thought it was okay to do the things that we used to do on the streets just to be able to eat, to have somewhere to sleep. And now we were sleeping on park benches. For a long time, I didn't talk to my dad. I didn't talk to my dad for about 15 years because I was holding a lot of resentment towards him, and I didn't want nothing to do with that man. I thought I hated him. It wasn't about 2 years ago when my wife finally, like, she kept telling me that I should talk to my dad to let things go, to make amends with them. And you know what? I remember picking up the phone and calling my dad and having a conversation with him for like 2 hours. And I was thinking, like, man, I don't want to live like the way I used to live before. And I ended up talking to my dad. We made amends. I forgave him and everything. And I feel better about that. My dad passed away 2 years ago. I think he passed away a couple of months after I made amends with him. So I was able to let go of all that. Growing up for me was like, it was horrible. I didn't have a good childhood. I think I grew up a little bit too fast. I didn't have no guidance. I didn't have anybody telling me what was right from wrong. We pretty much had to learn from our mistakes, and my best judgment always led me to juvenile hall. I grew up in juvenile hall, went from juvenile hall to prison. I fought a few cases. I've been in prison like 4 times. Altogether, I think, I'm 37 years old. I think I have a little bit more than 25 years in institutions. Today, I'm proud to say that I'm becoming a better person. I'm becoming a better husband, a better father. I'm a recovering drug addict. I've been at Homeboys for about 19 months now. And since the first time I walked into Homeboys, it's been amazing. My life's been amazing. I'm able to get services through Homeboys. As far as talking to my therapist, I learned about PTSD. I learned about myself when working on myself. Father Greg, he's been a big supportive person to me and my wife, my kids, everything. And I never thought that growing up, I never thought that there was anything better for me other than prison and anything, because that's all I knew. I never thought that I could be as happy as I am today. I wake up every morning feeling blessed and happy now. I thank God every day for each moment that I get to spend with my wife, with my kids, or even walking through the doors and be of assistance to some people there. People that barely walk in through the doors or that want to hear our story. I'm blessed. I feel like I'm blessed to come before you guys and share a little bit about you guys, and hopefully that you guys get something out of my story. I've been going to school for about 8 months now for welding. I fell in love with welding. I'm LA City certified welder now. I'm trying to build a career. I'm trying to be a better person. For a long time, I didn't think, I have 2 daughters. I have a 17-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old daughter. And for a long time, I didn't think that I didn't know how to be a dad. I never had a father figure in my life. I didn't know how to be a dad. I'm still learning, and it's been quite a journey. My daughters, I talk to them now. They still get mad at me at times. Like I don't make all the right decisions. But the thing is that I'm trying to do something different today. that I'm trying to do something different, and I'm very blessed and pleased to say that I feel a lot better. Now I'm going to introduce Father Greg to you guys. Thank you guys for having us here.
They said, sorry, we got nervous. You were fine. You were great. Yeah, sure, go ahead. Thank you. So it's a real privilege to be with all of you. And I was at the office, and one of the homies came up to me and he said, hey, gee, Mr. Rogers called. He'd like his sweater back, he said to me. And I said, bastards. It's the privilege of my life for 35 years to have worked with gang members, and the day won't ever come when I have more courage, or I am more noble, or I'm closer to God than Jose and Raquan and the thousands of homies I've been privileged to know. It's a real honor to be here. I love this place. I'm honored to call Father Tony a friend, and I admire you for your tenacity to get a quality education and to turn that into something. You know, what Martin Luther King says about church could well be said about your time here at St. Francis. It's not the place you come to, it's the place you go from. And you go from here to imagine a world that looks differently than it currently looks. Mother Teresa diagnosed the world's ills correctly, I think, when she suggested that the problem in the world is that we've just forgotten that we belong to each other. So how do we stand against forgetting that? How do we imagine a circle of compassion and then imagine nobody standing outside that circle? You go from St. Francis to dismantle the barriers that exclude. And there's only one way to do that, really, and that's to anchor yourself way, way out at the margins. Because if you stand at the margins, look under your feet, the margins are getting erased because you chose to put yourself there. And you go from St. Francis to stand with the poor and the powerless and the voiceless, to stand with those whose dignity has been denied. You go from here to stand with those whose burdens are more than they can bear. You even will have the privilege, and some of you already have, to be able to stand with the easily despised and the readily left out, to stand with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop, and to stand with the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. And so you go from St. Francis to create a community of kinship such that God, in fact, might recognize it. No kinship, no peace. No kinship, no justice. No kinship, no equality, no matter how singularly focused you may well be on those worthy goals. They can't happen unless there's some undergirding sense that we belong to each other. And I suspect if kinship was our goal, we would no longer be promoting justice, we'd be celebrating it. And so you go from here to the margins and you stand there and you brace yourself because people are going to accuse you of wasting your time. But the prophet Jeremiah writes, in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. You go to the margins and other voices get heard. So for 35 years, the homies have taught me everything of value, and I'm eternally grateful to them. But, you know, in the last handful of years, they've taught me how to text, and I'm really grateful because I find it sure beats the heck out of actually talking to people. And I'm pretty good at it, you know, LOL and OMG and BTW. And the homies have taught me a new one they always use, OHN, which apparently stands for, oh, hell no. and I've been using that one quite a bit lately. I know I'm not alone in being vexed by this autocorrect thing. I remember a homegirl, tough cookie named Bertha, on a Sunday, she texted me and she goes, "Where are you at?" And I texted her back, "I'm about to speak to a room full of monjas." And those of you who are taking Spanish know that monjas means nuns or sisters, religious women. I'm about to speak to a room full of monjas, and I pushed send, and autocorrect told her that I was about to speak to a room full of ninjas, which she thought was pretty darn interesting. You know, even today, the homies, their hair is always on fire, and they're going to cut off my lights, and I need a car paintman, and my car broke down, and so, homie right now just says, "My brakes don't work, can you help me out?" And so, I'm the priest they mistook for an ATM machine. So this one homie only needed $100 to finish his off his rent, and I just didn't have it. So I wrote back simply, "Things are tight." And I pushed send, and autocorrect told him, "Thongs are tight." And he wrote me right back, and he said, "Sorry to hear that. What about my rent?" So there I am with two homies just like these two guys, and we're about to go to Palm Desert to speak to a high school there. And we just had morning meetings, so, where we gather in the morning at 10 minutes to 9 and have a prayer, and somebody gives a thought for the day, and we sing happy birthday, that kind of thing. And then we got in the car. And, well, there were older vatos who do a variety of things at Homeboy. Well, Manuel had the front seat, and Poncho had the back seat. We were 15 minutes on the road when Manuel gets an incoming text, and he reads it to himself, and he chuckles. And I said, "What is it?" "Oh, it's dumb. It's from Snoopy back at the office." Well, I'd just seen Snoopy. Snoopy greeted me, gave me a big abrazo. And Snoopy and Manuel work together in the clock-in room, where they clock in hundreds and hundreds of our workers, all gang members. It's a tough job. I wouldn't want it. And I said, "Well, what's he say?" "Oh, it's dumb. Hang on, here it is. Hey, dog, it's me, Snoops. Yeah, they got my ass locked up at county jail. They're charging me with being the ugliest vato in America. You have to come down right now, show them they got the wrong guy." Well, the three of us, I nearly drove into oncoming traffic. We just howled with laughter. And then I realized that Manuel and Snoopy are enemies. They're from rival gangs. They used to shoot bullets at each other, because I remember. Now they shoot text messages. And there's a word for that, and the word is kinship. How do we obliterate once and for all the illusion that we are separate, that there is an us and a them? Every one of you is involved in service, which is a good place to start, but don't stop there. Service is the hallway that gets you to the ballroom, which is the place of exquisite mutuality, where there is no us and them. Otherwise, there's a distance in service. Service provider, service recipient. You want to bridge even that distance. You go from St. Francis to create this community where there is no us and them. So even bridge that distance in service. One of the great privileges of my life was knowing Cesar Chavez, the great farm worker union organizer, and it was a privilege to call him my friend. And he was one of the best listeners of anybody I was ever in the presence of. If you were talking to him, he was laser beam focused. He never was looking over your shoulder to see if, the mayor was getting close or something. But famously, a reporter had commented to him and said, "Wow, these farm workers, they sure love you." And Cesar just shrugged and smiled and said, "The feeling's mutual," which is the hope. You don't go to the margins to make a difference. You go to the margins so that the folks at the margins make you different. There was a homie once, I remember, who I met in Houston after a talk, and he had been in prison, and now he was working, trying to calm things down in the streets of Houston, and he pleaded with me. He said, "How do you reach them?" Meaning gang members. And I found myself saying, well, for starters, stop trying to reach them. Can you be reached by them? Which is a whole different story. How do you bridge the distance that exists, even between service provider and service recipient? Well, there was a homie, nobody found more job opportunities at Homeboy Industries than this guy. We all called him Dreamer. And he grew up in the projects. I knew him since he was a mocosito growing up there. And he's doing fine now. He's in his 40s, has a good job, house, wife, kids. But in his early 20s, he was kind of a yo-yo, back and forth, being locked up. I'd hire him, I'd find him a job in the private sector, but then he'd always wander back to vague criminality, usually something involving drugs, the sale of or the use of, and then he'd wander back to me, and it was a frustrating pattern. So this one time he finished a 4-month stretch of probation violation in county jail, and there he was sitting in front of my desk, and he says what gang members often say, this time it'll be different. I go, all right. So with him sitting there, I picked up the phone and I called a friend of mine named Gary, who runs a vending machine company in Alhambra. And so Gary had hired homies in the past, so I'm hoping against hope maybe he'll do it again. And sure enough, he says, you tell that guy he can start tomorrow. That's a holy man right there. And so Dreamer began work at the vending machine company. Well, 2 weeks later, there he is again in front of my desk. I couldn't believe my eyeballs. I said, Híjole Madre Santa, here we go all over again. But this time he reached into his pocket and he pulled out his first paycheck and he said, damn, gee, this paycheck makes me feel proper. I mean, my mom, she's proud of me, and my kids, they're not ashamed of me. And you know who I have to thank for this job. And I said, well, who? And he looked at me strangely and he said, well, God, of course. I said, oh, sure, no, that's right, that would be God. He goes, you thought I was going to say you. I said, no, gosh, God's number one. He said, you are so lucky we're not living in them Genesis days. I'm sorry, them Genesis days? He goes, yeah, because God would have had struck down your ass already by now, he said. Well, the two of us, we fell out of our chair howling with laughter, and I defy you to identify who's the service provider, who's the service recipient. It's mutual. So Homeboy Industries was born a long time ago, 1988, when I was pastor of the poorest parish in Los Angeles, Dolores Mission. And it was nestled in the middle of two huge public housing projects, Pico Gardens and Aliso Village. And at the time, they comprised the largest grouping of public housing west of the Mississippi. We had 8 gangs at war with each other, which is not very common in public housing projects. LAPD called my parish the place of the highest concentration of gang activity in the whole city. I buried my first young person killed because of this sadness in 1988, and sometime next week I will bury a kid named Alex, who was my 252nd kid killed. Alex worked for us a number of years ago. So we did a lot of things, I guess, at the beginning. First thing, principally, was we started a school because there were so many middle school, junior high age gang members who no school wanted. So they gave them the boot, and they were in the projects wreaking havoc in the middle of the day, writing on walls, selling drugs, violent. So I would walk out to them and I'd kind of isolate them one at a time, and I'd say, hey, you know, if I found a school that would take you, would you go? And to my surprise, every single one said yes. And then, you know, I couldn't find a school that would take them, so that kind of forced my hand. So right across the street from our church is our parochial school, grades K to 8, occupying the first 2 floors. But the entire 3rd floor was the convent, where the ninjas lived. And so I went up there and I sat all the nuns down and one evening, and I said, hey, would you guys mind, moving out, and we could turn the convent into a school for gang members. And they looked at each other and they said, sure. So gang members came in large numbers to our church property, and people in the parish would come up to me and say, hey, aren't churches supposed to be hermetically sealed, good people in and bad people out? And I thought that was a good gospel challenge. And then the gang members said, if only we had jobs. So myself and the women, we marched around the factories that surround the projects trying to find felony-friendly employers. And that wasn't so forthcoming. So we just started things. A maintenance crew, a landscaping crew, a crew to build our child care center, all made up of members of the 8 rival gangs. And then in 1992, some of you may have heard about this, after the Rodney King verdict, every pocket of poverty just ignited, and there was that unrest that lasted for some days. Every pocket of poverty except the poorest pocket, my parish, didn't explode, and so the LA Times wanted to know why that was. So I said, maybe it's because we had 60 strategically hired rival gang members who were working together. They had a reason to get up in the morning, a reason not to gangbang the night before, and a reason not to torch their own community. So a movie producer read this article, a guy named Ray Stark, who happened to have $500 million, and he summoned me to his Beverly Hills office, and he said, how should I spend my money? I look back on it now and I can see that I woefully undershot my request, but I said, well, there's an abandoned bakery across the street from the school. You could buy it. It has ovens. They don't work. You could fix them. We could put, I don't know, hairnets on rival enemy gang members. They could bake bread. We could call it Homeboy Bakery. And that was my entire business plan. And he said, sure. So we were off and running again. And a month later, we started Homeboy Tortillas in the Grand Central Market in downtown LA. Once we had plural, we changed our name from Jobs for Future to Homeboy Industries, as if there was any industry involved in this. Not everything worked, I'll be the first to admit it. Homeboy Plumbing was not really hugely successful. Who knew? People didn't want gang members in their homes. I did not see that coming. And now, as was mentioned in the kind introduction, we have evolved our way into becoming the largest gang intervention, rehab, and reentry program on our planet. So we have 15,000 folks a year who walk through our doors trying to reimagine their lives. It's a healing place. It's a community of tenderness. Gang members come in with enormous backpacks filled with chronic toxic stress, and they find rest, and they discover the truth of who they are. At Homeboy, we believe in that Buddhist saying, "Oh, nobly born, remember who you really are." So everybody's in therapy. We have 4 paid therapists, 49 volunteer therapists, including 3 psychiatrists. We have case managers, navigators. We have 60 classes that are always ongoing. We have free tattoo removal. No place on the planet Earth removes more tattoos than we do. We have a designated clinic, 3 laser machines, 1 paid physician assistant, and 43 volunteer doctors. So if any one of you is starting to regret that Golden Knight tattoo that you have, just see me afterwards. And it was all started because of a guy named Frank, who I didn't even know. And he came into my office, wandered in after 2 days out of Corcoran State Prison, and he's sitting in front of my desk. And tattooed on his forehead, filling the whole space like a big old billboard, big block black letters, filling his forehead, it said, "Fuck the world." And he looked at me and he said, I am having a hard time finding a job. And I said, well, Frank, maybe we could put our heads together on this one. I think, well, where do I send them, to McDonald's? Do you want fries with that? No, I don't want fries. Mothers clutching their kids running out of the store. So naturally, I hired him, and he bagged bread. That was his job. He just put the bread in the bags. And then I found a doctor at White Memorial Hospital who had a laser machine. And he donated 1 hour a month to chip away at Frank's forehead and about 5 other guys. And in no time at all, I had a waiting list of 3,000 gang members who wanted this same treatment, so we couldn't stay with that arrangement. Parentheses, Frank is currently a security guard at a movie studio in Hollywood, and there is no trace left of the angriest, dumbest thing he's ever done, proving once and for all that everybody in this gym and outside of it is a whole lot more than the worst things they've ever done. And so then we have all our businesses, 9 social enterprises and training programs, our solar panel installation training, Homeboy Bakery, Homeboy Silk Screen, Homeboy Homegirl Merchandise, Homeboy Diner, the only place you can get food at City Hall in Los Angeles. We have a restaurant at Terminal 4, American Airlines Terminal at LAX. Homeboy Grocery, where we sell chips, salsas, and guacamole in a variety of places. Homeboy Recycling, where we recycle electronic waste. We have farmers markets. And Homegirl Cafe, where women with records, young ladies from rival gangs, waitresses with attitude will gladly take your order, and they cater. It's a who's who. I promise you, anytime you go there, you're going to run into somebody, a celebrity or an elected official. Vice President Joe Biden came when he was vice president, motorcade and Secret Service. Jim Carrey, Jack Black. Once Diane Keaton came for lunch, Oscar winner, movie star, Godfather movies, Annie Hall. Her waitress was Glenda, and Glenda's a big girl. Been there, done that, tattooed, felon, parolee, gang member. She has no idea who Diane Keaton is, and so she's taking her order, and Diane Keaton says, well, what do you recommend? And Glenda rattled off the 3 dishes she really likes. And then Diane Keaton says, well, I'll have that second one. That one sounds good. And for some reason, at that moment, something dawns on Glenda. She looks at Diane Keaton. She says, wait a minute. I feel like I know you from somewhere. Like maybe we've met. And Diane Keaton, deflects it humbly. Oh, gosh, I suppose I have one of those faces, that people think they've seen before. And then Glenda goes, no, now I know. We were locked up together. And that just took my breath away when I heard it, and I don't believe we've had any further Diane Keaton sightings now that I think of it. But suddenly, kinship so quickly. Oscar-winning actress, attitudinal waitress, exactly what God had in mind. And what does God's dream come true? Well, Jesus says it pretty clearly, that you may be one. St. Francis is not the place you've come to, it's the place you go from. And you go from here to choose to be enlightened witnesses, people who, through your kindness and tenderness and focused, attentive love, return people to themselves. At Homeboy, we don't hold the bar up and ask homies to measure up. We hold the mirror up and we tell people the truth. Oh, nobly born, remember who you really are. You are exactly what God had in mind when God made you. And then you watch folks become that truth. They inhabit that truth. And no bullet can pierce it. No 4 prison walls can keep it out. And death can't touch it because it's huge. But at Homeboy, everybody knows you have to reach in and you have to dismantle the messages of shame and disgrace that get in the way, that keep people from seeing their truth. I would invite you to find in the Acts of the Apostles one odd, peculiar line, and it says only this: and awe came upon everyone. And it suggests that the measure of health in any community at all, including this one, may well reside in our ability to stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment at how they carry it. So a number of years ago, I was invited to speak in Richmond, Virginia to 600 social workers, and it's what they call a gang in-service. And so they corral all these social workers into a ballroom at a hotel for the day from 9 to 5, and they have keynote speeches and workshops and breakout sessions. And so they invited me to go there and speak, and I figured, well, to give a keynote, I guess. And so I said yes, and I bought my ticket. So a week before I was to fly to Richmond, Virginia, I pull out the letter that originally invited me, and to my horror, I discovered that I was to be the only speaker from 9 to 5 all damn day. And I said, oh, hell no. So I called in 2 trainees, Andre and Jose. And they were in like their their 9th month of our 18-month program. And I sat them down, and I said, look, at the end of the week, you're flying with me to Richmond, Virginia. I'd like you to get up in front of 600 social workers and tell your stories. Take your time, because we got a long-ass day to fill. Well, I'd never heard their stories, and Jose gets up first, and he's probably 25 years old. Gang member, tattooed, been to prison. And at that phase in his time at Homeboy, he had become a very valued member of our substance abuse team, a man solid in his own recovery. Now he's helping younger homies and homegirls with their addiction issues. So he spent a stretch in prison, but he also had a stretch as a homeless man and an even longer stretch as a heroin addict. So he gets up in front of 600 social workers and he says, I guess you could say my mom and me, we didn't get along so good. I think I was 6 when she looked at me and she said, why don't you just kill yourself? You're such a burden to me. Well, 600 social workers audibly gasped. And then he says, it sounds way worser in Spanish, he said to them, and we got friggin' whiplash going from gasp to laugh. But then he continued, I think I was 9 when my mom drove me down to the deepest part of Baja California, and she walks me up to an orphanage. And she knocks on the door, and the guy comes to the door, and she says, I found this kid. And she left me there for 90 days until my grandmother could get out of her where she had dumped me. And my grandmother rescued me. My mom beat me every single day of my elementary school years with things you could imagine and a lot of things you couldn't. Every day my back was bloodied and scarred. In fact, I had to wear 3 t-shirts to school every day. The first t-shirt because the blood would seep through, and second t-shirt you could still see it. Finally, the third t-shirt you couldn't see any blood. Kids at school, they'd make fun of me. Hey, fool, it's 100 degrees. Why are you wearing 3 t-shirts? And then he stopped speaking, so overwhelmed with emotion, and he seemed to be staring at a piece of his story that only he could see. And when he could regain his speech, he said through his tears, I wore 3 t-shirts well into my adult years because I was ashamed of my wounds. I didn't want anybody to see them. But now I welcome my wounds. I run my fingers over my scars. My wounds are my friends. After all, how can I help heal the wounded if I don't welcome my own wounds? And awe came upon everyone. The measure of your compassion lies not in your service to those on the margins, but only in your willingness to see yourselves in kinship with them. For the truth of the matter is this: if you don't welcome your own wounds, you may well be tempted to despise the wounded. For there's an idea that's taken root in the world, and it's at the root of all that's wrong with it. And the idea would be this: that there just might be lives out there that matter less than other lives. You stand against that idea. This place stands against that idea. And St. Francis is not the place you've come to, it's the place you go from to stand against that idea. Let me end with this. Sometimes it occurs to schools, mainly universities, to force their students to read my books against their will. I'm not complaining, but my alma mater, Gonzaga, number 1, thank you very much, and they ruin my bracket every March. Anyway, they invited me to speak because they had forced their incoming freshmen to read Tattoos on the Heart, and so I said, yeah. And so they're going to have a big talk Tuesday night, 1,000 people. And they said, hey, can you bring 2 homies with you? And I always bring homies, you know, if somebody's going to pay for it. And so I always pick homies in the same way. I always pick enemies, rivals among our trainees, just to force them to share a hotel room, just to mess with them. And I always pick homies who have never flown before, just for the thrill of seeing gang members panicked in the sky. I remember once I had 2 older vatos, we were at LAX and we were going to fly to DC, and one of them, dead serious, said, hey, G, are we flying Virgin Airlines because it's our first time? I said, well, yeah, you know, it's a requirement. We'll be coming home on American. So I picked 2 homies. Bobby, an African-American gang member, worked in the bakery at the time, and Mario, who at the time worked in our merchandise store. And oh my God, I think I've done this 1,000 times with men and women. I've never picked anybody like this guy, Mario. Oh my God, petrified to the bone. It was starting to freak me out a little bit because, you know, he was hyperventilating. I'd never seen anybody do that. You know, he's like that, you know, and we hadn't even, you know, boarded the plane yet. And so we were at Burbank Airport, and, you know, a smaller airport, big bay windows, Southwest Airlines mainly, big planes, but they don't have that hermetically sealed chute that, you know, to board the plane, you have to walk out onto the tarmac like you're the president, and you climb up the steps to go to the front of the plane and the steps to go to the back of the plane. And so I'm sitting there with Mario. Bobby's exploring the airport, and our plane arrives and people deplane, and so I turn to Mario and say, hey, dog, that's our that's going to be our plane. And I think, oh my God, he may die before we actually climb those stairs. And so then I see our flight crew arrives, the pilots and flight attendants. And I remember there were 2 female flight attendants. Both of them had very large cups of Starbucks coffee. And they're schlepping up the front steps to board the plane. And Mario goes, when are we going to board the plane? I go, well, you know, as soon as they sober up the pilots. There they go now. Perhaps I shouldn't have said that. So I should tell you that in our 32-year history as an organization, Mario is the most tattooed individual who has ever worked there. He's all sleeved out, covered in tattoos to his fingertips, neck blackened with the name of his gang from jawbone to collarbone, head shaved, covered in tattoos, forehead, cheeks, chin, eyelids that say the end, so that, you know, when he's lying in his coffin, there will be no doubt for anybody, I guess. And well, I'm walking him through the airport to calm him down, and I'd never been in public with him. And it was incredible. People are like this, and mothers are clutching their kids a little more closely. I'm thinking, wow, that's interesting, because if you were to go to Homeboy tomorrow, walk up to anybody there and say, who's the kindest, most gentle soul who works here? They won't say me. They'll think for half a second, and they'll say, Mario. Yeah, Mario. Mario works in the cafe. Mario is proof that only the soul that ventilates the world with tenderness has any chance of changing the world. So we get to Gonzaga, there's the big talk Tuesday night. What they don't tell you is like 93 other talks all day Tuesday. So it's this class, this meeting, this lunch, this class, all damn day. So I tell Bobby and Mario, I'm not going to speak in any of these. You get up, and I'll sit in the back of the classroom. Well, they did. They told their stories. Mario in particular was terrified, but they did a good job. Stories of terror and torture and violence and abuse of every imaginable kind. And honest to God, if their stories had been flames, you'd have to keep your distance, otherwise you'd get scorched. I wouldn't have survived even a single day of either of their childhoods. So we get to the big Tuesday night venue, 1,000 people. I coax them to get up and speak. They're terrified because there's so many people, but they did a good job. I got up and did my thing, and then I pulled them to either side for the Q&A, and I said, yes, ma'am. And a woman stands, and she says, yeah, I got a question. It's for Mario. First question out the gate. And Mario's a tall, skinny drink of water, and he clutches the microphone. He's just terrified. Yes. And she says, well, Mario, you say you're a father. You have a son and a daughter that are about to enter their teenage years. What wisdom do you impart to them? You know, what advice do you give them? And Mario closes his eyes and he clutches the microphone, and I can sense he's starting to tremble, and he's getting a friggin' hernia trying to come up with whatever the hell he's going to say when suddenly he blurts out, as soon as he says those 2 words, he rushes back to his microphone, clutching closed-eyed refuge. And now I know he's losing the battle with his tears, but he wants to get the whole sentence out. I just don't want my kids to turn out to be like me. And there's silence until the woman who asked the question stands, and now it's her turn to cry. Why wouldn't you want your kids to turn out to be like you? You are loving, you are kind, you are gentle, you are wise. I hope your kids turn out to be like you. And 1,000 total perfect strangers stand, and they will not stop clapping, and all Mario can do is hold his face in his hand, so overwhelmed that this room full of strangers returned him to himself. And everybody standing had been returned to themselves, which shouldn't surprise us because it's mutual. Everybody looking at each other and saying, oh, nobly born, remember who you really are. don't think for a second that St. Francis is the place you've come to. It's always going to be the place you go from, and you go from here to imagine a community of kinship such that God might recognize it. And you stand at the margins, and you imagine a circle of compassion, and you imagine nobody standing outside that circle. And here's my sense of you already. You've ceased to care if anyone accuses you of wasting your time. For in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. You go from here and other voices get heard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Greg. Roquan and Jose, if you could please come over. Thank you. I want to thank you for sharing your story. Such an amazing story, your sincerity and your good hearts. And those are the gifts for you. And on behalf of St. Francis High School, continue doing a great job, the great job that you're doing right now. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you. And Father Greg, I'm the one who's privileged to know you as a friend, and I've heard you so many times, and you always move me to tears. You do such a great job. You are compassionate, you got a great heart, and you take a lot of risks, and people do not understand that. When you work in the environment in which you work, and you do what you do, you take risks, but you don't really care because you love people. So thank you very much for being with us, for your great words. Thank you. And here's a gift for you. Thank you so much. You're always welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, St. Francis. Thank you all for being here and joining us. Again, Father Greg, Raquan, Jose, thank you for being here. It was a great experience. St. Francis will do this again next year. Seniors, you are dismissed. You can go out those back doors over your right shoulder. Freshmen, you may exit out these doors right over here. And I ask sophomores to exit out this door. Juniors will get you out right now. Hold on. Juniors, follow out this door over here, please.